Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Bryce is Right. My name is Bryce Aroni, and I'm here to promote positive atheism and secular humanism. And today we are having an episode where it's another common ground episode we are trying to find with a theist, someone who has different beliefs. This time it's a Christian, or someone of the Christian variety. I believe he is anyway. We're going to find out. But his name is Brady Blevins. And hopefully we really get a good idea of what he believes, why he believes it, and find out how he found his way into theism and what prompts him to come on shows like this. But to be honest, we're not going to spend too much time on that. We want to probably do a little bit of that. He's already done a little bit of a deconstruction of his beliefs on other shows. Some of you may be familiar with him from an episode of the EA show, which was hosted by Justin Downing, now Khalil Allah, and co-hosted by Sunny Shell. And in that episode, he gave us his theological background in depth. So if you're curious about that, you can check that out. And a link will be in the description for that as well. But we'll have him do a quick rundown, and then we'll maybe get into some discussion covering what he thinks are some of the best arguments for what he believes. So without further ado, Brady Blevins, come on down. You are the next contestant on The Bryce is Right. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Bryce. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. So I opened by basically stating that you would do a minor reconstruction, and we didn't have a lot of preparation for this in the beginning, but there were some technical difficulties, and I'm kind of without a producer today due to some other technical difficulties. So I'm doing everything myself, but I am curious if you could just give us like the short and sweet of basically what it is that you believe, how you came to believe it, and then we'll get into kind of what you think are the arguments to support that, and also why you're even willing to come on a show like this, for which I am very grateful. I have to say I appreciate it. I always appreciate it when I can get theists on of any variety, but it's rare.
Sure.
So who are you, and what do you believe?
Well, first of all, we talk about common ground. It's good because I think everything from a technological standpoint was falling apart for me as you were having your own issues. So we definitely share that for certain. But no, to kind of give you just a quick sketch. I am a Christian, evangelical Christian. I guess if you wanted to get like specific to denomination, I'm Baptist. In fact, I'm an ordained Baptist minister. And have been so for close to 20 years now, ordained that is. But now how I came into the faith is probably not real exciting. So I grew up in a Christian home, and we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And so initially for me to just in terms of believing it or accepting it, it was pretty much, this is what I've been taught, and this is, it seemed to make sense to me. I didn't have any significant questions, and I was young. I was 10 years old when I placed my trust in Jesus Christ. And obviously at that point, you don't really know a whole lot of anything other than maybe some of the just very basic aspects of the faith. And that's okay. But for me, getting older, and I felt God's call in my life to go into the ministry. And so I graduated high school and I went to Bible college. And then it was while I was there and learning the deeper aspects of the faith, you start running into, okay, how come some people believe in Christianity, some people don't? Why do some people believe in Islam? Or why are they Mormons or Jehovah's Witness? Or, you could just kind of name your religion or sect or whatever the case is. And that really drove me to maybe to dig a little deeper. And honestly, really before college, I'll never forget in terms of how I got into apologetics even was when I was in the 8th grade. I had my buddy sitting next to me in the back of our U.S. history class. We're sitting there talking, trying to do anything but learn U.S. history. And something came up about birthdays, and he is, well, I don't celebrate birthdays. And I said, you don't celebrate birthdays? He said, no, it's against my religion.
It's
I'm
kind
like,
of strange. doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm like, what kind of religion doesn't celebrate birthdays? And he's, well, I'm Jehovah's Witness. And I'm like, Jehovah's Witness? Okay, well, I've heard the word Jehovah before, but what does all this mean? And so that had kind of stuck in the back of my mind. Well, then I get into college, and my first semester, I take a class called Cults and Worldviews, where we look at all the the different worldviews, some of the different religions of the world, and then we focus in on some of the cults of Christianity. And it was there I realized, wait, hold on. There's just some objections that are out there. I mean, there's some people who have objections against Christianity, and so that more or less started really, I guess, my investigation of it. So,
what was the name of that class?
Is Cults and Worldviews.
And that was a secular school or a
religious? No, I was in Bible college at this point.
Bible.
So,
okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
And so, I mean, it's 4-year, fully accredited college, but my studies were Bible and pastoral ministries, and that was pretty much the purpose of the school. Being there was for people who wanted to go into ministry. And so, while I was there, it's this time of beginning to look and consider some of the arguments, because, I'm not the one who says, people just don't believe for no good reason. People have reasons. Now, I think sometimes when we investigate those reasons, we find that maybe they don't hold up quite as well as we thought that they would. And that's okay. I think that all of our beliefs should be challenged, whether you're Christian or atheist or any other belief system out there. We should be searching for the truth and be willing to let it take us wherever it leads. And so that's basically my background in terms of how I came to Christianity. So on the front end, it's kind of like, hey, this is what I've always been taught. It sounds pretty good to me. It makes logical sense. I've done bad things. Jesus died on the cross and provides forgiveness for those bad things that I have done. That sounds like then in turn you get to spend eternity in heaven in the presence of God. Sign me up. And then, but in terms of really investigating my faith, really didn't come until probably about 8-9 years later, as I was in college, and learning about different religions and worldviews. And in fact, my professor for that class is now my boss at Watchman Fellowship, which is a Christian apologetics ministry that deals with cults, the occult, New Age spirituality, counterfeit religions, and controversial doctrines.
Okay, now that's a lot to unpack. Thank you for that, by the way. You probably told this story numerous times, and so hopefully it doesn't get too old. I'm curious a little bit about the nature of the education that you were getting at your Bible college. You said you became skeptical upon meeting people of different faiths, and then you learned about other religions from this class that you took. I'm wondering, because it was at a Bible college and because it was being taught by a Christian professor, and the purpose was ultimately to get a degree in the theological background of the religion. Do you think that you were getting an unbiased appraisal of the other religions, or do you think you were getting an idea of what these other religions were from the perspective of your own religion?
Yeah, I wasn't so much skeptical of other religions, in that more or less that I was just coming to a place of like, okay, they obviously believe what they believe is true. I believe what I believe is true. It's almost kind of like this, Jesus, he's either the Son of God, as the Bible portrays him, or he's got to be, or he's not. It just doesn't matter. Now, as far as what I was hearing, the education that we got in terms of religions, it was spot on, especially as I've dug deeper. My job at Watchman, like I told you, it's the president of Watchman Fellowship, who's now my boss, as I'm the senior apologist with Watchman. I mean, he was the one teaching the class, and he is a former fourth generation Mormon. So he's not like when we're talking about Mormonism, it's not this is what I think Mormons believe. This is what I believed when I was a Mormon. And so, digging into the beliefs, everything we dealt with was from their sources. In fact, even now, as an adult, well, I mean, technically 18, 19, you're an adult, but the requirements there and what's essential is that you don't just read the Christian books on these other religions. And most of them are pretty good. I mean, most of them really go backwards, been backwards to try to make sure you have an accurate portrayal of the group. I mean, you want to be able to still man their arguments. But the most important factor that I have done is reading the other group's materials. So, I mean, if, when I studied Islam, I've read the Quran, I've read the Mormon scriptures. I've read many of the Watchtower materials. You have to look, really, you have to do two things. One, you have to read their information, whatever it is that they're putting out, is the stuff that you have to read. Then the second thing is, and this is probably the absolute best thing, is you go and you talk to other people that are adherents of that group, and then you talk to them and you ask them what it is that they actually believe. So that's the important factor of it.
And so, as part of your studies, you would go out and you would ask these other members of these other groups what they believe and why, or was that separate from the study?
There was a little bit of that involved in the course, but I mean, it's a 3-hour course, and half of it's on worldviews, and you're spending a week on. Well, maybe not a week. I mean, there were some topics got more time than others. I mean, when you're talking Islam pre 9/11, it's basically here's the time frame it got started. This is their basic beliefs. I mean, it wouldn't be like today where you would spend an ample amount of time on Islam, because since 9/11, I mean, everybody in America knows what Islam is, and I mean, it's a huge difference.
I would probably push back on that a little bit. I don't think everyone in America knows what Islam is.
Well, they know the name.
That most people in America don't know what Islam is.
Well, let me clarify that to say they know the name and they know it's a religion, as to where if you go back into 1998, and I don't know how old you are, but
I'm old enough.
You're old enough to know that you pull somebody to the side in 1999 and say, "What's Islam?" and they're gonna say, "I have no clue." As to where today, I think if you pull them aside and say, "Hey, what's Islam?" they're gonna say it's a religion. Now, are they gonna be able to know it's Muhammad is the prophet? He he prays, and Jibril says Quran and gives him the first surah there in the cave. I don't think they know that. So,
yeah, and I would say that probably a lot of this is subcultural in a sense. I grew up in New York, and there were Muslims, all around me growing up. So I've always known that it was a religion, just like Christianity and Judaism. So some of it might have to do with how prevalent the religion is in your area. But while I would agree with you that a lot of people would say that they know what Islam is today, beyond it just being a religion, I'm not sure that they know much about it. In the same way that I think that people would make the same argument about other religions, and so I'm curious about what you've concluded, because you said that you've read, like, we'll just use Islam since we're talking about it, the Quran, for example. What about Islam do you think, what convinces you that this is not the correct religion, but that Christianity is correct?
There's a lot of problems with Islam internally. First and foremost, they say Jesus is a prophet. Okay, well, if Jesus is a prophet, what did he prophesy? Well, you're not going to find any of the prophecies in the Quran. So where can we go to find the prophecies of Jesus? The Gospels. I mean, that's where we have the prophecies of Jesus recorded. Well, Jesus prophesied in Mark chapter 9 that he was going to die and rise on the third day. Well, I mean, that's anathema in Islam. I mean, no, Jesus did not. They crucified him not, is what the Quran says, translated into English. And so therefore, if he is a prophet, then he's a false prophet. If you're holding on to what the Quran says,
how do you clear that?
Well, like I just said, Jesus prophesied his death and resurrection, and the Quran says.
I got you. I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Do you know what the Islamic apologetic argument is for that? For the reason for why they don't accept the prophecy as written in the Gospels?
What I've heard before is that they believe that the Gospels are corrupt.
Correct. So if the Gospels are corrupt, then anything written in it that's attributed to Jesus wouldn't make him turn out to be a false prophet. It would just mean
sure
true prophet, and the text is corrupt. I suspect that that's what Muslims would probably say. So that
but see, but that brings up another problem, Bryce, because the Quran says that God's word cannot be corrupted or changed. And then the Quran also says that the Injils, or Gospels, is God's word. So we have a major problem.
Yeah, so there are internal, so it's the internal inconsistencies within the Islamic religion that convinces you that the entire thing is false.
Well, to me, I would think the identity of Jesus is essential. I mean, wouldn't you?
Well, I probably would only think that if I had a presupposition that he was the Son of God or the Savior of man. But if my presupposition was only that he existed as a prophet, then anything beyond that would be less important. Okay,
let me reframe it like this, because this has nothing to do with presuppositions. This is the same whether you're a Muslim, a Mormon, a Catholic, a Baptist, Zoroastrian. The Quran says that Jesus was no more than a prophet. They said that he was not crucified. Okay, they crucified him not. But yet the Gospels that the Quran calls the Word of God, which cannot be changed or corrupted, in the Gospels, Jesus prophesies his death and resurrection. I don't understand how I don't understand that the disconnect that's there.
No, I would agree with you. And so that goes back to the point of it being internally inconsistent. And so the question I asked after that was, is the fact that it has problems with internal consistency the reason that you are rejecting all of the claims of Islam?
Yeah, I think that claim alone is, that claim alone is sufficient. But but there's other issues. But to me, that's primary.
We don't have to go through every single issue, because, and by the way, I'm not an Islamic apologist. I'm just curious as to how how a person who is a theist, especially a believer of one of the monotheistic religions, figures out which one is more accurate. And
let me give you another one. I think that you'll like this, because it also ties into why I remained a Christian as an adult. Is that you take the Quran, for example. Now Muslims will say it's corrupt. Okay, well, when was it corrupted? Well, it was corrupted right after the life of Jesus. Okay, well, we have the Quran. You have Muhammad. He should have known that the Bible was corrupted. Why did he tell us that the Injil, the Gospels, and the Torah and the prophets, why did he tell us that was the word of God if he knew it had been corrupted? And if they say, well, it was in the 11th century. Okay, well, again, you have the wait, hold on, you have it. But here's a problem that we have with the Quran. With the Quran, what you had is the third rightly guided Caliph Uthman steps up and notices that there are different recitations. There are different Qurans that are out there. and this is problematic for him. And he said, no, this is not good. We must. And so he orders the Uthmanic recension, and then edits the Quran down. Now here's why it's so important. We cannot be sure that the Quran that we have today is the Quran that was originally delivered to Muhammad. Now, on the flip side, here we have nearly 6,000 copies of the New Testament that range dates from, as early as, the 2nd century, over 1,000+ years. And yet, as we compare these, man, they match up. They match up not just very well, but extremely well.
I'm curious about that. So that was interesting the way you put that, because you said that we have, I don't know how many thousand you said. It's how many thousand?
Close to 6,000. It's 6, like 5,800. Yeah.
Okay. But if they're copies, then how can we be sure that any of them are close to the originals?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you do that through textual criticism. And so what you're doing is you're comparing the manuscripts to manuscripts. Mm-hmm. And what do we have that's matching? Now, I'm not a textual critic, so I'm not going to try to act like I can give you the complete rundown of how it's done. But basically how it's done is they're comparing all these manuscripts. And what it does is it allows you to see where, if somebody tried to add something in, or you'll notice the difference between maybe a different spelling, or maybe, maybe the scribe was in a hurry or something, and, they left a line out or something. Well, how can you tell that? Well, I mean, if you're looking at, if you have like 40 different versions of this one verse, that this one's from the 4th century, this one's from the 8th century, this one's from the 9th century, then just using that, you're able to come to a reasonable conclusion of what it most likely said. Now, we don't have the original autographs, so I mean, can we say that we're 100% certain? Well, I don't think you can say 100% certain unless you have the actual autographs, but through the science of textual criticism, I think that we can be, just as certain as you can be, without being.
Do you think that the Bible is 100% accurate?
Well, yes, but I might would want to clarify that in that, within the Hebrew and the Greek, sometimes, translators make mistakes. And
let me rephrase. I'm talking about the original writing.
Yes.
In the original languages. Do you think that everything that is written in them is true as they are written?
Sure. Yeah, I would hold to the inerrancy and infallibility of the Bible.
Okay. Why?
I think it stands the test. I think that as we examine and we look at the Bible, I mean, and this gets into like, start getting to stuff like archaeology, we find all the coins that have been mentioned in the Bible have been found. You take that in opposition to like the Book of Mormon. We never found any of the coins that are mentioned in the Book of Mormon. Or the places.
Grant you for a moment. Mm-hmm. I want to grant you this because I don't want you to keep comparing it to the other religions, because I don't believe that Islam is true.
Yeah.
I don't believe that Mormonism is true. Mm-hmm. Right. So you don't have to convince me that.
I'm not. Yeah.
I'm already sold on that idea. I do not believe in Mormonism. I do not believe in Islam. But the problem I'm having is that I don't believe in the Christian Bible either. And so telling me that you think that it provides some type of consistency where the other two is lacking doesn't really
doesn't do anything for you. Okay. All right. Yeah. I was still kind of working off our original question. So why do you think that the Bible is inaccurate? What causes you to think that?
Well, before we even get into because my question is what causes you to believe that it is, and you started comparing it to
okay. Well, I mean, I can tell you the coin,
for example, and you said because there have been some archaeological pieces of evidence that confirmed it. But I would even be willing to grant that the Bible is true in some of the claims that it is made. But your position seems to be that it's inerrant, which would mean that every claim that it makes is true, right?
Yeah.
And so if you were asking me the question, what makes me think that it's not true as a collective, it would be all of the instances in the Bible where it gets something wrong.
Okay. Like for what? Like example?
Well, let's take the global flood, for instance. Do you think that there was a global flood?
Yeah, I think there was.
Okay. Are you aware that that is contradictory to what geological evidence shows that there could have been a global flood?
I'm not a geologist, but that's definitely a debated issue. I would point more towards the fact
I would
that
point out. I'm going to let you finish that, but I would just point out within the field of geology, it's not a debated issue. It is the geological evidence is very clear. If there had been a global flood, then there would be clear evidences of that. And it seems that most of the evidences for a global flood that theists who believe in this point to turn out to be not evidences for the thing that they're claiming at all. There's actually scientific explanations for that in geology that don't match up to a global flood. So that's why I reject the premise. One of the reasons.
Yeah. And again, I'm not a geologist. So I don't want to press the point, but there probably could be a lot more said there, but we'll go past it for right now. The fact is that you have literally hundreds of people groups in antiquity pointing to a flood story, and they all kind of have the same kind of run of what we see in Genesis. But there's also another issue that's involved. Now, I do believe that it was a global flood. But there are some Bible-believing Christians, I mean, people who I would call my brothers and sisters in Christ, who do not believe that it was a global flood, but they believe it was a local flood. And the Bible says that the world was flooded. Okay, there's two different ways that you can interpret that. I mean, I could say in my world, nobody knew about Islam in 1998. Well, I live in Texas. Okay. Now, you in your world, you knew Muslims. I mean, this was not the first time you'd ever heard the religion. You ever heard of it, and so you have the world in that sense. Or are we talking about, hey, this world that we're in is facing great peril because of COVID-19. Okay, well now we're talking about like the entire world. And so that is a debated topic within Christianity, and that actually doesn't affect the inerrancy of the Bible. Now, obviously, I'm either right or wrong in how I'm choosing to interpret that word. But obviously,
I would agree with you. I understand that there are different points of view on how to interpret Scripture, particularly the flood. There's local flood ideology, and then there's global flood. But certainly the idea of a local flood would be more consistent with the scientific evidence as far as geologists are concerned, which is one of the reasons why there are local flood proponents in Christianity. But you don't interpret it that way. You interpret it as it being a global flood, right?
Yes, I think that it's global, and I think
possible?
That there's.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, okay. And again, and I really don't want to get off on this because I'm not a geologist. And I think if you're going to have this conversation, you should have somebody who's better qualified to talk about it. My area is cults and false religions, and I think you probably already seen a little bit of that being more of my expertise. But I mean, you take the Grand Canyon.
We can move on from geology, and especially if you want to say, because I'm willing to concede that, hey, if you interpret the Bible where it says there was a worldwide flood, if you interpret it as a local flood, well, then, okay, that particular idea may not be contradictory, right? That may not be inconsistent. But there are other things in the Bible. For example, young Earth creationism, are you versus old Earth creationism? I'm not sure which one you are. Or do you believe that the Earth is over 10,000 years old or less than?
I'm pretty sure that it's at least 76 years old because that's how old my dad is. Listen, here's the deal.
Do you think that the Bible indicates how old the Earth is?
I don't think that we can know for certain. It comes. Well, here's the deal. It comes down to this word yom. It's the Hebrew word for day, and it goes back into this. It could be a day, it could be an age, it could be 24 hours. It could be, there's room for it. The problem is that none of us know really how old this Earth is, or really even how old the universe is. I mean, we take our best guesses, but even with our modern day science. In fact, I tell you, one of my coworkers at Watchmen, he'd be a real good guy to talk to about this issue, because this is more of his field. The in essence, we're trying to measure. It's like trying to measure Dallas, Texas, with a ruler, or a yardstick.
I really like it. And I have to applaud you when you said none of us really knows how old the Earth is. I think that that's a fair statement. And I think that that's worth pointing out, because a lot of people tell me that they do know, and they tell me that they know from the Bible. So if you're willing to concede that you don't know exactly how old the Earth is based on the Bible, then I'm willing to concede that I don't know exactly how old the Earth
is. And some Christians will try to use Usher in, I think, golly, it was like 1624 or something. I don't know. He tried using
counting genealogies throughout.
The genealogy, but the problem is we I say we know, we're rather certain that there are gaps in those genealogies, and so and who's the, there's a lot of problems in trying to say. I definitely would say it's definitely has to be at least a little bit older than like 6,000 years. Just because we know there's gaps in. Even if Usher was on the right track, we know he's got to be off by a little bit at least. And so
the Bible, because I don't want to get too far into younger. It sounds like we are in agreement.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
we don't really know for sure. So you're not saying that the Bible suggests that the Earth is young, is I guess what I was trying to get at.
No, I definitely think that there's a way that, if you want to interpret Yom as a 24-hour day because it uses day and night within those Hebrew verses, then I think that it would point to a younger Earth. But there's nothing in the Bible we're not going to find created on such and such date in the Bible. I don't think that we get that at all. Not that exactitude.
I would agree with you that if we looked at the Bible, we are more likely to arrive at the conclusion that the Earth is young, because that's the conclusion that I arrived at when I read it. Unfortunately, that contradicts known science, which is one of the reasons why I either have to force an old Earth interpretation onto the Bible or throw it out. Kind of like I have to either force the local flood presentation in order to be consistent with the evidence that we see, or throw it out. But that's two things that could be interpreted either way. What about the supernatural claims in the Bible? Because I have to say, there's a lot of magic and magical things going on. There's animals, there's resurrections, there's all kinds of things that don't really seem to conform to reality as we observe it today. Going, from the beginning of, going back to the Garden of Eden all the way to the end. And so how do you, what causes you to believe that anything supernatural ever happened?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, if this universe came into existence the way that scientists tell us, then there has to be something supernatural. First and foremost, there has to be.
I would disagree with that. I'm going to let you finish your thought. After making this point, I think that I reject the premise. Even just the phrasing, if the universe came into existence, because that's adding in, that's kind of shoehorning in this idea that the universe did come into existence. But I define for me what you mean when you say universe, and then continue your thought.
I'll listen. I understand there are some who still hold to some version of a steady state model, but from what I understand, that is on the that's more of a minority view in the scientific field, this universe that we know is what I would be. Now, some people would say, well, what if there are other universes? Okay, well, like a multiverse. Okay, well, I mean, you could, that could be the case, but the problem is, I mean, we haven't discovered it. I mean, it's almost like universe,
maybe this would help. When you
mm-hmm.
say, when you are using the word universe, are you referring to our local presentation of the universe, the observable universe that we know exists, and
that would probably be
it. See, or are you referring to anything and everything that has ever existed at any time, the entire cosmos, whatever that may be?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of a hard question in terms of I mean, as far as we know that this is all that there ever has been.
Well, the reason I asked the question because in cosmology, in cosmological mm-hmm. science, when they refer to the universe, they're talking about the local presentation, mm-hmm. which is that which we can identify mm-hmm. going back to a few microseconds after the Big Bang, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so they're not talking about anything which may predate that. They're not talking about anything which may be outside of that, which could include other universes or mm-hmm. anything like that.
Exactly.
And what I find is that sometimes people, when they use the word universe and they start evoking science, they could be talking about it in that sense. Mm-hmm. But then other times they're talking about the entirety of all existence.
Yeah.
Including things which may be beyond that. And
sure.
So it kind of ends up moving the goalposts, or it's an equivocation fallacy because they're using two different
exactly. Yeah. And that's my problem for trying to go beyond what we can see, because at that point, I mean, to say it's an argument from silence is like a major understatement, because all we can know is in essence, all we can know about the universe. I mean, we can't see we have no evidence or anything. If there was another universe, we haven't been able to see another universe. I mean, the speculation of a multiverse. But anyway, all right. So we'll set that one to the side for a minute. But let me just kind of paint this picture here for a moment. If there is a God who created everything, and I understand that's a big if for somebody who's not a believer. If there is a God, is it a far stretch of imagination that on one occasion he could make a donkey speak, or on one occasion he could make a serpent speak, on one occasion he could make an axe head float?
So this is getting into kind of a tautology, because if we want to hypothesize that there is a supernatural God, well then mm-hmm. sure, he could do anything supernatural because mm-hmm. we've defined him as supernatural, right? If we say, if magic is real, could I do a magic trick? Well, obviously, yes, right? But the question mm-hmm. is, did any magic tricks ever actually get done? And do we have any reason to believe that they did, to conclude that there is magic? So that's kind of how
now I wouldn't say magic. I
was using that as an example, as an analogy to
mm-hmm.
kind of see how I was translating your thought process, because you asked me, if there is a God, could he make a donkey speak?
Yeah.
If you are saying that the act of a donkey speaking is supernatural and we are presupposing a supernatural God, well then of course.
Yeah.
But that doesn't.
But see, that goes back to what I was hinting to earlier in the whole cosmological argument. If this is all that there ever has been, and who knows that there was something before it? I don't even know how we could even know if there was something.
Me neither. Which is why I don't have a reason to believe the claim in the Bible, because we have no way of knowing that. But you've concluded that the Bible was true, and you're saying that mm-hmm. it's true because you believe that the universe came into existence and that something brought it to it.
Well, that's not why I believe the Bible's true. That has nothing to do with why I believe the Bible's true. That's an argument for the existence of a God. We have to have a whole nother conversation just to get to the God of the Bible.
But I think the question I asked you was, why do you believe mm-hmm. in the supernatural? And then you went to, mm-hmm. well, if the universe.
Yeah, well, I was trying to set it up, because here's the deal. In going with the first thing I said, points to the fact that there has to be a God. There has to be something that's spaceless, timeless, immaterial, personal, powerful, that can put all this into existence. And whatever it is what I would call God. And so to think that thing, we'll call it God, can interact and allow things to happen, a supernatural event to happen, is reasonable in those premises. So if we can prove that God exists, then the supernatural is I mean, it's pretty much a moot point. Now, to get more specific to your question, though, we're talking about.
But I want you to finish.
Okay. So really and truly, I guess what you're really asking is, are there evidence for miracles that a supernatural thing like somebody rising from the dead, could that happen?
Actually, that wasn't what I was. I mean, I'm happy to go there as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to get to the baseline of supernatural and trying to figure out if we have reason to believe that there is such a thing as supernatural, because even the thing that causes the universe to come into existence, as far as I'm concerned, that would just be another natural thing. I don't know how you conclude that that's supernatural or that it would be a god.
What makes something natural?
So I define natural as basically anything that exists in the world that we occupy and that we see and interact with, and that's subject to, some form of laws that anything naturally occurring, right? Anything that I suspect I define that which is natural as the same thing that you would define as natural.
Yeah, I think we have common ground here. Mm-hmm. I think we have common ground here. So understand then.
Go on with that, Kenneth just presented $5 here through a super chat. So I'll go ahead and read it. And this is a question for you, actually, and you can get to it now or after the thought you wanted to make. He wants to know if you've eliminated all of the natural ways for a universe to form, and if not, then you cannot say that it's God or that it must be God. So what do you think? And that's kind of along the same line of reasoning that I was going. Have we eliminated the natural?
Yeah, I have a problem with the question. I mean, do we need to find all the potential killers before we convict the guy who we're rather certain is the killer?
The answer is
what I'm saying?
In the American system of justice, it's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So if there could have been other killers, then you cannot convict someone because it could have been them as well.
But you're not hearing me though. Do we have to go and search and find? Do we have to go? I mean, if we say this a guy killed somebody, do we have to go and find the the whereabouts of every single guy? Does every single man in the country have to give an alibi?
No, we have to eliminate the way that the legal justice system works anyway, which is a little bit different from what we're talking about here. But you have suspects in a legal justice in a crime situation, right? There's a suspect where the evidence is either sufficient to warrant a guilty verdict or there's insufficient evidence, and then you have to conclude that they're not guilty. It doesn't mean that they're innocent. It just means that there's insufficient evidence to warrant belief that they're guilty, right?
Yeah.
But so that's it. That's how you work. But we know that the natural exists is kind of my position. I'm aware of the natural world. I'm not sure if there is any such thing as the supernatural, or if the idea of the supernatural even makes sense, because no one has ever presented a thing to me that has been supernatural or told me how they are able to conclude that it is supernatural.
Okay. So if we're going to talk about supernatural, and we both agree on natural, then when I talk about a miracle, I'm talking about a supernatural event, something that overpowers the laws of nature. This is a supernatural.
Do we have evidence that anything like that has ever happened?
Oh yeah, I think we got great evidence that Jesus rose from the dead.
Such as
that Jesus. What evidence? I mean, you have eyewitnesses.
No, we don't.
You have their testimonies recorded.
No, we have testimonies that there were eyewitnesses. We don't have any eyewitnesses, though. Remember, these.
Well, that's not exactly true, because many of the disciples saw. I mean, Paul saw the resurrected Jesus. Peter saw the resurrected Jesus.
So the story is that Paul had a vision of Jesus, not that he saw Jesus resurrected. Paul wasn't even in the scene when Jesus.
That's true.
Died or was resurrected. So he did not see Jesus or Jesus being resurrected. He just had a vision of him on a Damascus Road experience.
Well, in his account to the other disciples, he said, Jesus appeared to me. This is more than just a vision or more than just a voice. He said, Jesus appeared to me. And so that is one. But here's the deal. So if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, they could have squashed Christianity. I mean, Christianity wouldn't have even got out of the gates. They could here's his body right here. I mean, look, you can see right there where the nails went through.
I don't know that there ever was a Jesus.
So Jesus mythicism.
But if I grant that there was, could there be naturalistic explanations for the disappearance of his body?
There could be, but I mean, do you really want to go down that road?
Well, that's the only road I have to go down until someone presents evidence to me of the supernatural.
Well, I know, but let's go down them for a minute.
This is the supernatural thing, but I have no reason to believe that if you just point to another supernatural thing. See what I'm saying? It's like I need to see.
Well, I mean, that wasn't the only one, but the deal is that there were all these witnesses who saw the resurrected Jesus.
I don't
and I understand
that there were any witnesses. I have evidence that there is a story that claims that witnesses were there, but we don't know. We don't know if that's true.
I know you don't, but the thing is that remember we're talking about something that was written just a couple of decades after the life of Christ. I mean, if you wanted to check up and put it into the story, okay, all right, you had all these witnesses. Let's go. Hey, let's go interview these people. I mean, this thing could have been squashed. Let's talk about naturalistic explanations.
Was that done?
I'm certain that it probably was, because there's nothing more that the Jews wanted than to squash Christianity.
Well, that's what the Jews wanted, but the Christians wanted to uphold it, and the people writing the Bible, the New Testament, were Christians. So did they actually, are there any interviews of anybody in the Bible? There's testimony that there were witnesses, but do we know anything about those people?
Well, I mean, yeah. Paul gives a list of them, and some of them were even authors of the books of the Bible. You have James, the brother of Jesus. He did not believe that Jesus was who Jesus said he was until what? After he saw the resurrected Christ. Then all of a sudden he's the pastor of the Church of Jerusalem. He wrote the book, by his name in the Bible, James. Yeah, I mean that's pretty solid evidence.
I would say that if they had seen what they claim to have saw, if we have reason to believe that what's claimed to be eyewitnesses actually were eyewitnesses, and if we also have reason to believe that these people who say they were eyewitnesses actually saw something, do we have any reason to believe that what they saw was actually a resurrection, other than their claim?
Well, we know that mass hallucinations don't work that way. When people have hallucinations, because that does happen sometimes when people lose a loved one, they believe that they've seen their deceased loved one, and that can happen. But they're not consistent. It doesn't happen in a mass group.
I disagree with you. I think there are indigenous people in America who have mass. I wouldn't call them mass hallucinations, because that could be offensive in their spiritual beliefs, but they certainly go on joint vision quests where they do have shared experiences. So that does actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, but you're kind of changing it. I mean, we're talking about a scene where there's 500 people who claim to have seen the resurrection, but let's work off some of these natural explanations. I mean, what are we going to say?
Just on that last point, I'm going to highlight this because it reflects it. This is Materialist Dan. He says that we have a claim of 500 witnesses, not 500 claims, and I would agree with that. But I'll let you go on to the other point.
No, well, I mean, that's the wording there's kind of awkward because it's 500 people that Jesus appeared to at one time. So, I mean, yeah, you could say that was...
The claim in the Bible is that he appeared before 500 people, but there's not 500 people claiming that.
No, you don't have them all listed individually and they're all saying this, that, and the other. No, not at all.
So it's one person claiming.
Yeah, but here's
yeah.
Okay, but we have a logical problem though, because we got to go down the road of the natural explanations. I mean, what are we going to say that it was the wrong tomb? I mean, how easy would that have been to fix? No, it wasn't that one. It was that one. You know.
Yeah. So, how many naturalistic explanations are there?
I'm not really certain. I mean, I've heard a handful of them, but it pretty much everybody who argues against the resurrection of Christ, Bart Ehrman's smart, and Bart Ehrman says in regards to the resurrection, I don't know what happened, and that's honestly the best answer. Because the minute you try to say that he was thrown into a common grave, the minute that you try to say that that his body was stolen, or there's the wrong tomb, or whatever else you might think of, you put yourself in a really bad place that just doesn't follow a logical sense. You know,
I would say that's true of the people concluding that a supernatural event happened. And I would agree with you that Bart Ehrman is probably smart for saying, I don't know. It's one of my favorite things when people say, when you're in a situation like that, when you cannot conclude based on the evidence that this naturalistic explanation works, to say, I don't know, rather than to say it was a supernatural event and proof of a miracle.
If you're interested in digging deeper into the evidence of the resurrection, Gary Habermas is by far, I think, the absolute best when it comes to this subject, and he would be well worth reading as you unpack this kind of stuff.
We have a super chat from Kenneth. The only reason people claim that the tomb of Jesus is that the tomb is Jesus's tomb is someone told Constantine's mother that was the cave, and that was it. No evidence.
He's referring to, or whoever it was that made that. They're referring to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is over the alleged site of Jesus' burial site, and I would agree that we can't. I mean, she was like 300 years or 260 or so years, 270 years after the time of Christ, and she basically goes on a kind of a tour there of the Holy Land, and she's in Jerusalem, and she's kind of asking the locals, well, hey, where was it that Jesus was buried? And they're like, hey, over there. And okay, well, this is the spot, and so, I mean, could it be? It could be, but
what do you think about that argument I made a little while ago, that when we don't have enough information to make a conclusive case to rest on a decision, that the best answer is I don't know? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think so.
Because that's the position of skepticism, which is the position that I'm holding. So I'm glad that we have at least that level of common ground, because if you don't know, and it could be this way and it could be that, and there's not enough evidence to say for sure, well, then why would you say it was that way? Like, that's kind of how I feel. And it sounds like you're making that argument for the people claiming this absolutely didn't happen, but at the same time, you're making another argument that you are convinced this other thing happened. So that's whereas what I'm doing is I'm saying I don't have evidence that either one is true or false. And so,
you have evidence, you just don't find it convincing. Would that be fair to say?
Well, I don't have any evidence that a resurrection has ever happened. I have testimony from people that there were witnesses to a resurrection, but that's all anecdotal, right? That's not really, when I talk about evidence, I'm talking about empiricism, something that I can actually see, evaluate, witness, test, that sort of thing, something that's objective.
So do you hold to like logical positivism?
I don't know. I think so. What is
Okay.
your
It was basically kind of like a form of naturalism in the 1920s, and
yeah, I would say
it
I'm a naturalist, so I would
it
say, you
it
know,
fell out of favor pretty quick because it's self-defeating ultimately, and so that's why scientists steered
if
away from it
that's
pretty
so, then
quick.
maybe that's not what I am. But I'm definitely, if your question is, am I a naturalist? Then the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Are you saying naturalism is self-defeating?
Well, I think that there's a significant problem with naturalism
Okay.
because,
Go ahead.
well, because there's well, first, let me have you do this. Let me have you define what you mean by naturalism, rather than me just kind of assume. I don't want to straw man your position.
Pretty much what I said before. Nature exists. Things
Mm-hmm.
that I'm aware of outside of myself are natural, and unless they're artificial. In other words, they were, man-made or created by an animal or uh, something that has agency to create, the ability to create something. So if it's a created thing, I would call it artificial. If it's something that occurs in nature without, a mind and something with agency to do things, then I would say it's natural. So
Okay.
like a beaver dam would be artificial because it's constructed by a beaver, right? But a bunch of sticks that fell in a storm that blocked up a river would be natural, even though they're kind of doing the same thing.
And so that's, I guess I'm still struggling. I mean, I understand what you just said, but I'm still trying to understand your position. So you're trying to say that that like only the physical exists?
I
Is
wouldn't reduce the natural only to the physical, because we have concepts that exist in the
okay.
mind,
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
mathematics and
Yeah.
things like
Logic,
that.
pain,
Logic, yeah.
love. Yeah.
So
Mhm. Okay.
these
Good.
are
Good. We're on the
yeah.
same.
Like I have an
Okay.
imagination and I can imagine a bear,
Hmm.
but there's no
Yeah.
actual existing bear there in
Hmm.
terms of the physical reality. But it is a manifestation of my mind, which seems to be the result of the neural activity in my brain. So ultimately, everything is reducible to the natural, even if it's kind of like emergent properties, right? So I do
Okay.
think that there are emergent properties which are non-physical, but ultimately they're reducible to the natural.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you, probably like all the way up to like the very 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 end, when you said that it could all be um, reduced to the natural. I would be with you all the way right up until the end there,
Yeah.
because yeah, but
But I mean,
I
but
don't.
one of the reasons is because you're presupposing the supernatural, right? And that's probably where the divide is, because I don't have a reason to add that in
Well,
until someone.
here's the problem though. If we take it all the way, if we say that ultimately it ends at um it ends at the natural, then we really are having to reject everything else that we just said, and that's where I would pull back and say, um, yeah, there's got to be a disconnect, because if it all comes down to brain chemicals, then there's really no way that we could know anything in that sense.
It probably depends on what your definition is of knowing, but I think that we can
Hmm.
be reasonably convinced of things. For
Yeah.
example, I know that I exist, right? That one's
Hmm.
pretty easy because I'm a
Hmm.
thinking agent. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So going back to Descartes, I think, therefore I am. If there is an agent there to do thinking, then
Hmm.
it exists just by the virtue of the fact that it's doing something. So the fact that I'm having an experience is proof of my own existence. Now, there are
Hmm.
other things that I presuppose on top of that, like your
Hmm.
existence, right? Because I don't have
Sure.
your existence. I only have
Mhm.
my experience telling me that you exist. But
Exactly.
so that's a little bit of a presupposition, but it's a necessary one, right? We
Hmm.
don't have a way to get around that, right?
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
problem of other minds. That's just something that
Hmm.
we all kind of take for granted, right? So
Hmm.
when it comes to necessary presuppositions like that, we're stuck. But when we
Hmm.
start trying to get to like the supernatural, that's not a necessary presupposition for me. that seems like adding something because we don't know. It's kind of like the God of the gaps argument.
Yeah.
We don't understand where the universe came from, therefore supernatural, and I'm like, that's a fallacy, right? That's an argument from incredulity. So that
I could see how you came how you would come to that conclusion. For me, I don't see. I mean, I don't say, well, I don't know, so it must be God, because I would agree that's a really bad way to think. And I realize that there are some Christians out there who say really bad things, and we all cringe a little bit, but it's okay. There's people in every group to do it.
Yeah, we're getting to the hour mark here, so we won't go a whole lot longer. I would just say, I'm actually going to get to two questions because we just got a question from the chat.
Okay.
This one's longer, and then I'll get to my final question. But this is the broader question from Jason. Wants to know, is scientific consensus a legit way of generally evaluating our world? Isn't it where we must at least start? If evidence counters consensus, then it will change consensus. I think he's asking, will it change consensus? So,
yeah, I mean, obviously consensus is, I think a lot of times it's really helpful because, for the most part, a consensus, if it's truly achieved at a place of legitimacy, I mean, and, so taking away those outliers, that are out there. But we know that some of the greatest scientific discoveries came for those who kicked back against the consensus. And so for me, like, I'm definitely going to pay attention to the consensus. But I do like the last part of what he said, because we're talking about, is there evidence to believe otherwise? And I think that's where he really hit the nail on the head with what he said after his question, is because, I think that I mean, I don't know if you can start at any other place than the consensus. And so to some extent, I would definitely agree with it. But on the second part, I would say I want to be careful with consensus.
Yeah, and I think that's probably an area where you and I would probably agree. So a little bit more common ground there. When it comes to scientific consensus, I would say that it is useful for those who only have a layman understanding of the scientific principles that they're talking about. When we talk about the science of climate change, for example, I believe in climate change because I've studied the science of climate change. But if I didn't, and all I had to go on was the fact that 97% of climate scientists believe that climate change is real, that it's man-made, that the trends are showing that the Earth is warming, and only 3% weren't, I'm probably going to be more likely to believe in what the consensus is, because these are people who have actually studied it. But the fact that they've studied it and that they represent a consensus doesn't tell us anything about whether it's true. It just kind of gets us, it is a more reasonable place to start, and it's a reason to question the outliers. Why is it that only 3% of all of the world's climate scientists are against this idea and 97% are for it? That would cause you to want to dig a little bit deeper, and then that's when you start looking at the evidence. So for me, the thing that should convince is actually the evidence, not the fact that most of the people in the field agree with it.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that we have to ask, why do the 97% agree? What's leading them to this conclusion? Is it they think that this could be wrong, but this is how you get your research grant? So you have that kind of stuff.
Oz, the great and powerful, who's the executive producer of this show. Thanks for being in the chat, Oz. He has a super chat for $4.99. He wants to know if Paul having a dream counts as credible evidence. And I would elaborate on that, just to expand on his point. Is Paul having a vision of Jesus sufficient evidence to warrant someone else believing that Jesus was resurrected?
Okay. All right, two things. First, I'm going to go directly to his. Paul wasn't having a dream. Paul was walking down the road. Paul was awake. He was lucid. There's nothing to suggest he was having some kind of seizure or anything like that. Okay. Now, to answer more of your question, am I gonna, if I'm living in the first century, am I gonna take Paul, you saw this vision of Jesus, and so now I believe that Jesus resurrected? That might not would be enough to get me to believe, but what occurred after he claimed to see the resurrected Jesus would have been very convincing evidence. And so, if you're familiar with the story of Paul, he was an up and comer, trained under the best teacher in Israel, and he was the number one persecutor of Christians. Going to Damascus with papers in hand to arrest these Christians, and then now all of a sudden he becomes arguably outside of Christ the greatest figure of Christianity. That doesn't seem that would be more to give me the evidence to say that this must be the case.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the only pushback I would have there is that might be good enough for a person living in that century who was witness to all the other things that happened, but nobody living today was. And so, but everyone living today who is a Christian is saying that all of that evidence is good enough for them to believe it, even though they haven't witnessed any of that stuff. So that's a disconnect for me too, because like, how can you say that, the fact that you have these claims from thousands of years ago that you haven't actually seen is good enough for you to believe that any of this ever happened?
Yeah, and to some extent, what you just described is the heart of the matter. Remember in John 20 when Thomas doesn't believe that Jesus is resurrected, and then Jesus appears before him. And then Thomas's response was, "My Lord and my God," literally translated, "Lord of me, God of me." And Jesus says, "A blessed, you believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who have not seen me and believe." And so, as far as what you said, a little bit of my pushback there would be, this is historical. I mean, are we going to believe the history of what happened? And I think that there's more evidence than just Paul. And so I do think that belief in Christianity is a cumulative case. I don't think that it's necessarily just like the one thing, if you will.
Yeah, I would say that the problem with cumulative cases is that people who offer cumulative cases, when you start going through the individual things that are supposed to be building the case, none of them stand on their own. And so it's like you're adding 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 and hoping to get to 14. But in reality, 0 plus 0 plus 0 is still 0, and so it doesn't actually build anything if none of those pieces of evidence can stand on their own. And I make this, Muslims make this argument to me and people of different denominations, but it's like the first argument you made doesn't seem strong enough to me. We have another super chat from Oz, so I have to read super chats because it's like free money.
Yes, do it.
Recognizing Oz says, "How do you know this to be true?" And it sounded like you made an argument because you quoted from the Doubting Thomas, where Jesus says, "You've seen me because you believe. Blessed are those who believe without seeing." Do you believe that? Do you think that there is a leap of faith when it comes to a lot of this, or?
First, before
have faith at all?
I'm sorry, you cut out.
Because Oz wants to know how you know all this to be true, and it sounds like you're saying we can't know for sure, but you're leaning that way because
I'll be honest. I mean, I can't say, do I 100% know that all of this is true? No. I mean, I don't think anybody can. I mean, just like it can't be 100% completely proven not to be true. It can't. I guess if like Jesus were to physically like come back and we could all talk to him, okay, well then that would solve it for all of us. Then we'd have something to deal with. But it does come to, and I don't like the word faith. I prefer to use what the word actually means in the Bible, and I hate that they translated it faith. Is trust. I trust what the Bible says because of the evidence that shows the Bible to be trustworthy. And that's kind of what a little bit of what we got into, what we started to get into at the very beginning of the show.
Do you think that because we cannot be absolutely certain, people like me who are skeptics are justified in our skepticism, that there are reasons to be skepticism of some of the claims in the Bible?
Yes and no, and I hate to answer like that. Yes, in the sense that I think that it's okay for us to have doubt and to doubt some of the claims in the Bible. Because I'm going to be honest with you, some of the claims in the Bible, I mean, they're I mean, you're telling me that a snake spoke. You're telling me, you're telling me these things. That could be very
other
difficult.
magical things happen too. Not just the snake smoke, but that a
Yeah.
staff turned into a snake, and
you have a number of the parting of the Red Sea, the lame being healed, the blind being able made to see, the deaf to talk, the yeah. I mean, there's a lot there, but where I think that we have a responsibility, and this goes beyond the Bible. We have a responsibility to investigate and see if these claims are true or not. And so, I'm sorry, I just saw somebody else's question pop up as I was finishing the sentence.
I'll allow you to decide, how much in depth you want to go. I think you kind of answered that before. You sound like
I can kind of give you a bullet point on this one to answer that question about. I think what they were asking is the trustworthiness of the. Hang on just a second. For me, with the Bible, it's it goes into stuff like archaeology, prophecy, the geography. I mean, we could even drill down deeper into like the names fit appropriately to the time in which the scripture is written. I mean, there's a number of things. For me, I'm looking at the manuscript evidence, and the statistical evidence, the spectator evidence. These are some things. All right, I see Oz.
I would love to talk to you about the statistical evidence, but we don't have time for that on this show. We only have time for one more question, and it will be Oz's super chat for $4.89. Could you be wrong about all this?
Absolutely. Okay. I could be wrong. Wow. Yeah.
That's really big of you to say, because so many times I have conversations with theists of all varieties that they're absolutely sure that their interpretation is true, just as sure, they're all just as sure as each other, even though they're all sure of different things, and they insist that it is right, and everyone would know it's right if they just read it the way it's supposed to be read. And so I'm really happy, like, for someone to be honest and admit that they
and I don't want to disparage other people, but have I seen the resurrected Jesus? Well, no, I haven't. So I'm having to trust, and I've deemed the evidence that I have to be sufficient for me to believe that. And so, I mean, I personally don't think that it's intellectually honest to say I am 100% certain that all this is true. Now, I'm not gonna do something foolish like try to put a number to it, because that would just be made up anyway. But I would say I'm sufficiently convinced based on what I read in the Bible.
I appreciate your honesty, and I also appreciate your civility and willing to come
you're welcome.
Show on an atheist network to talk to an atheist about what, kind of putting yourself in the hot seat. And I tend to push back a little bit, but that's just.
I love it. I thought you did a great job. I enjoyed being on here, and I enjoy your civility as well.
Absolutely. And for you, we actually haven't met before. This is the first time we're meeting.
Yeah.
I used to be a co-host on the old EA show.
Yeah.
We were in an episode of that, but I wasn't there that day, so we never actually got to have a conversation. So this is kind of the it coming full circle, so to speak. And
Well,
I
it's,
was
it's
about to end the show, Brady, but
uh-huh.
money just keeps coming in, and when money
All
comes
right.
in, you just kind of have to milk it for all it
Hey,
is.
I'll let you do that. I'll let
It,
you do
it's a
it.
compliment from Oz, the great and powerful, and
Well, thank you, Oz. Thank
of
you.
of course I appreciate that. Do you have anything? You mentioned that you were a minister.
Yeah.
Do you have like a website or anything? Because I didn't, to be honest, I didn't get any information that
Yeah, I know.
you
We're
wanted to
just kind of
promote.
flying here.
Yeah,
So,
we kind of threw it together, and I will go ahead and put it back into
okay.
when I edit the description. If you have
Yeah.
like a link to a website or a YouTube channel or anything that you want to promote, just go ahead
Yeah,
and throw it out there.
the ministry that I work for is called Watchman Fellowship. Our website's watchman.org. That's Watchman with an A. But what your viewers would probably be really interested in is something that our ministry does. Now we primarily focus on cults, the occult, false religions, New Age spirituality, that kind of stuff. But we do something outside of that. And every month, we have what's known as the Atheist and Christian Book Club. And what we do is we alternate between a Christian book one month, an atheist book the next, and then we discuss the book. So one of the things that we have done, it's just kind of neat because we started about 3.5 years ago, and just how the things blossomed. We first started out with Hugh Ross, who's an old Earth creationist and believes in the local flood. Oh, you have? Yeah, he's a very, very nice man, very, very nice. And so he was our first book, but now what we've had over the years is it's kind of picked up some steam, and so now we often have the actual authors on with us. And sometimes we have them. Now we haven't met in person since the pandemic started, but and we always broadcasted on, well, not always, but most of them were broadcast on Facebook Live, and so now it's done via Zoom. And then we later posted onto YouTube. But we have the authors out. So, like, for example, this month, the first Thursday in August is when we always have it, the first Thursday of the month. We'll be meeting at 7 p.m. Central Time. And the book that we're reading is A Universe from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss. And we will have Lawrence Krauss in person there at the book club. So if you ever wanted to ask Lawrence Krauss a question, this would be your opportunity. We've done very well getting some of the Christian authors in because between me and my boss, we have connections, personal connections with a lot of these guys. But we've done fairly well in being able to get a lot of the atheist guys in there as well. You mentioned you're not sure if Jesus exists or not. We had Richard Carrier. He came in live in person, sat down there with us, and we had a good time. In fact, we're looking at trying to possibly have him back on. Of course, with everything on Zoom right now, it's very easy to get the authors because,
they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, you just say, hey, just turn on your camera and talk to us for 2 hours, and you're going to get a bunch of people who read your book and care about you enough to have read what you wrote. So, but you can go to the website is I'll send it to you, but I believe it's Atheist Christian bookclub.org. I'll see if I can kind of sneak in here while we talk and get it together.
And I appreciate you being equal opportunity in terms of the guests and not just having one type of guest on, which is kind of what I'm trying to do here as well. Try to get different perspectives out there to encourage civil discourse. And I don't like straw man arguments, and I like actually talking to people and figuring out what they believe, why they believe it, what drives them to anything that they're promoting, that sort of thing, because I think that that's helpful in the world as opposed to the vitriol that you usually get with religion, theological debate is what I'm trying to
say. Well, to me, if you can't have this, I mean, we've lost all civility and hope as a society. That just because we believe different than each other doesn't mean that you're some horrible, hateful person, or I'm some horrible or hateful person. And so I think it's good to have these dialogues. And I got to tell you that, by the way, the website is atheistchristianbookclub.com. And for us, we started out, and at the very beginning, we'd say we're having a civil, friendly conversation, a civil conversation about things that we agree are the most important things to talk about. And then about I don't know, a year or so into it, my boss, who's the Christian half of the co-founder of the book club, Bill Cluck is he's the atheist co-founder. James Walker is the Christian co-founder. Somebody stopped James and he said, no. Don't say that this is a civil, friendly conversation. No, we are friends, and that is true. I mean, it's kind of been neat to see the friendships grow. I mean, I've gone and had coffee with a number of the people in the atheist group. One of the guys in our group has his YouTube channel as well, and I've been on there a number of times, more times than I can count. And so, it's a genuine relationship, and so with at least the regulars who have come. So I invite you guys to come. It's free. It doesn't cost anything, and it's a great opportunity to be able to. And you don't have to participate. You don't have to talk or anything like that. If you just want to go and be a fly on the wall, you can, or chat it up in the chat room. You can do that as well.
Well, Donna certainly appreciated it, as she has a super chat for $4.99.
Thank you, Donna.
Wonderful conversation. And speaking of self-promotion, I figure now is a good idea for me to kind of self-promote what we are about. We are having a get-together, the Atheist Network group community. And yeah, for those of you who might be interested in catching, if you just caught the show for the first time, we will be having a meetup, the Tang Gang, called Better. It will be held October 9th and 10th at the Allen County War Memorial Coliseum in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And reservations are available today at www.tart.live. Special guest appearances by Seth Andrews, Dr. Josh Bowen, Tom Jump, also known as T Jump, Anthony Magnabosco, love that guy, Cynthia McDonald, and Dave Warnock. And, you'll also get a chance to see the hosts of some of your favorite shows like Shane the Skeptic and yours truly. So, yeah, if you guys can make it out to that, or you're interested in seeing some of us, like I said, reservations, not I was about to say tickets, but it's actually reservations are available, and if you'd like to continue the conversation that we're having, thank you all, everybody in the chat, by the way, I really appreciate it. If you wanted to continue the conversation, I will be on Discord. The Discord link should be in the description. I don't know if you have any time after the show, Brady, you are welcome to join us as well. I usually don't hold people accountable for that, guests, especially when we didn't do a lot of prep time before. But, if you're free after the show, feel free to join us in the Discord if you want to interact with some of these guys. If you have other commitments, I understand if you can't make it.
It kills me. This will be the first time that I will have to say that I can't make it, and I'm so sorry, because the after shows, I mean, that's the funnest part, because then you really you could kind of go down all the different rabbit trails, and you don't have to worry about time.
We definitely had some other really analyzing questions in there, like how do you feel about gay rights, and I'm sure that we could have asked you about the role of women in the Bible and slavery and morality and all that. There's a lot of different places that we could have,
those are all shows within themselves.
We would probably get into some heated conversations, but we might have to save that for your next appearance. But hopefully we can get you back on. How do you feel about your appearance?
We'll have to make that happen, man. And your event sounds pretty neat. Seth Andrews was one of the guys that we had on the Atheist Christian Book Club. So he can kind of give testimony that we did his was it Fox News Christian, Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian, I think was the title of the book that he did. So but yeah, man, we'll have to do this again sometime. It was a pleasure getting to talk with you, and I enjoyed it.
You are always invited again. And anytime you have something new that you'd like to talk about, or when you get some free time, just hit me up and we will add you. We'll add you in the schedule somewhere. So
alrighty.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you've enjoyed this show, please do me a favor and hit the like button. Of course, you can catch me here on Tang weekly. I'm not here every day. Weekdays, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget to subscribe to Tang, the Atheist Network group, for more awesome secular content and more awesome guests. And for producer Wes, Sunny Shell, and Oz, the Great and Powerful, this is Bryce Aroni asking you to have your gods spayed or neutered.
Oh.